Governor Andrew Cuomo won an International Emmy, not because he's done anything in television, he hasn't been on some sort of series, just that he's done coronavirus press conferences. That's it. So he's winning an International Emmy for that. And Donald Trump has essentially lowered the bar so low, so severely low, that simply showing up and giving press conferences makes it appear as though someone is engaged in effective governing. So the International Emmys put this video together. Let's take a look at what it is they liked about Cuomo's press conferences.
You're New York tough, smart, united, disciplined, loving, and that is what the moment requires. We are responding to science and data. There's no politics here, just the facts, ma'am. My daughters tell me that nobody knows him and nobody knows what I'm talking about, but that's okay. Spaghetti and meatballs every Sunday. Today, we're going to have our family dinner, and Mariah brought her boyfriend. The answer on what you think of the boyfriend is always, I like the boyfriend.
It is now my distinct pleasure to present the 2020 International Emmy Founders Award to Governor Andrew Cuomo, with a little help from some of my fellow New Yorkers.
To my governor, the governor of Empire State, Andrew Cuomo.
Congratulations, Andrew, on your much-deserved Founders Award.
Governor Andrew Cuomo, you are the man. What?
I was trying to think of something that I could say to you that would be funny. And so I called your brother Chris, who could not understand why you were getting an Emmy since he's the one on television.
Well, Cuomo wasn't always calm and collected during these press briefings. In fact, just last week, he absolutely lost it when a reporter asked a completely valid question regarding New York and whether schools would remain open during this pretty devastating spike in new coronavirus cases. Watch.
If you were paying attention, you would have known we closed the schools in New York City 2 weeks ago. Remember when we did an orange zone and a red zone in Brooklyn and Queens, and we closed the schools? Don't you remember that?
It was 3 weeks ago.
Okay, so what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You're now going to override. We did it already. That's the law, an orange zone and a red zone. Follow the facts.
I'm still confused.
Well, then you're confused.
I'm confused, and
then I'll tell you what, Jimmy.
Parents are still confused as well. The schools in New
they're
York
not
City
confused.
tomorrow.
You're confused.
Look, to be quite honest with you, I'm still confused about what's happening with New York schools because Cuomo said one thing during that press conference. Later, Mike Bloomberg said something completely different. And so, my point in bringing that up is, if a journalist asks you a question about schools or anything pertaining to what this press conference is about, calm the hell down and just answer the question like a calm human being. But apparently he didn't even know the facts in regard to schools and whether they would remain open. But nonetheless, regardless of how he carries himself during these press conferences, it's important to take a look at what he either tried to do or did do policy-wise in New York during this pandemic. He was adamant about cutting Medicaid funding as this pandemic was tearing through the state of New York. And I have details on that and more. But Cenk, I'd love for you to comment on the aesthetics of good governing and how he's received an Emmy for this. I don't know, maybe I'm being too tough on Governor Cuomo here.
No, look, I agree with you completely that it's a low bar, and so I'm not as concerned about him yelling at the reporter. It was a big faux pas because De Blasio came out a couple hours later and said, "Yeah, we're shutting the schools down." So Cuomo was yelling at the reporter, "We're not shutting him down," and they are shut down now. So he picked the wrong time to yell at a reporter. And so I don't mind Democrats generally being more combative with the press. It was just a very poorly timed and executed way of doing it. Was he better at responding and explaining things on TV than Trump? A million times better. But did he do a great job overall? No, obviously the nursing home situation was deeply problematic. And then he stepped in it again today. He said he was inviting family over for Thanksgiving. Well, they told us, including Cuomo, don't invite family over for Thanksgiving because coronavirus is raging. He said he'd invite his daughters and his mom. His mom's 89 years old. So now they're inviting her over with the rest of the family. That seems to be against the protocols that he set. I'm more concerned about the other substantive policy issues, some of which you're about to bring up, Anna. But overall, this is why people get annoyed at Hollywood, right? And it's just a little too much irrational exuberance about corporate Democrats. Like Obama getting the Nobel Peace Prize within like 3 seconds of entering office when he hadn't done anything. And now, Governor Cuomo getting an Emmy for being better than Trump at explaining things in the middle of a pandemic.
You know what it is? It's because the policies that I'm about to talk about don't in any way impact the lives of like Spike Lee or Robert De Niro, right? Like they're not reliant on Medicaid funding. That isn't a question of life or death for them. But for so many people living in the state of New York, especially at a time when so many people lost their jobs due to coronavirus related shutdowns, the idea of cutting Medicaid is insane, but he was insistent on it, Governor Cuomo was. So I'm gonna read a few excerpts from this excellent piece in Jacobin about it. Governor 1%, as he's called by some, is insisting on taking an axe to the state Medicaid budget, even at the cost of $6.7 billion in emergency federal aid, and lying about it. So what's being referred to there is when the pandemic first began, the federal government offered to send money, Medicaid money, to states in order to ensure that the statewide Medicaid systems were at least somewhat prepared for the influx of people who were gonna be reliant on those programs in order to survive, especially after losing their jobs. We're in the middle of a pandemic, it all makes sense. And so the only way that states would not qualify for that money is if they said that they were going to cut funding to Medicaid. Why would the federal government send you $6.7 billion in Medicaid funding if you're planning on cutting the Medicaid program in your state? And he kept lying about it. He kept saying, we just don't qualify for that money because the way that this law was written was flawed. No, why don't you tell the truth? You want to cut Medicaid spending, and as a result, the state of New York will not qualify for the federal funding. But he wasn't really upfront about that with his constituents. As New York became a global epicenter of the pandemic, Cuomo's Medicaid redesign team, MRT, released its proposals to cut $2.5 billion from the state Medicaid budget, including $400 million to hospitals as they battle coronavirus in the next year. So in the end, the $400 million cut to hospitals happened. That happened. Governor Cuomo succeeded in that cut, which is absolutely disgusting. At the same time, though, they approved cuts to Medicaid, but decided to delay when those cuts would kick in because we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's a bad idea to cut Medicaid funding, obviously. As Cuomo calls for retired health professionals to re-enlist and orders hospitals to expand capacity by at least 50%, that understaffing and the state's elimination of 20,000 hospital beds, which Cuomo has likely been the single most important person in bringing about, according to Sean Petty of the New York State Nurses Association, are major limits on New York's response to the pandemic. So, I mean, hold as many press conferences as you want. And I get it, Trump is a buffoon, and anyone who's willing to hold press conferences that seem somewhat competent are gonna shine in comparison. But for the love of God, can people just look? Everyone in this country seems to be concerned about appearances. Like Nancy Pelosi ripped up Trump's speech. Wow, what an activist. Nancy Pelosi clapped sarcastically at Trump. Wow, she's so strong. Governor Cuomo holds press conferences. Okay, I don't care. I want to know what he's actually doing for the people of New York, and what he has done is incredibly counterproductive. So please spare me the aesthetics of leadership, especially when behind the scenes, these are lawmakers, these are politicians who don't care about people and never shy away from austerity that hurts working people in their states.
There's nothing that the mainstream media likes more than corporate Democrats. So when they see Cuomo, especially when they can juxtapose him to Trump, they're smitten, can't get enough of it. So that leaves it to the Jacobins of the world to write about how he cut Medicaid, because there ain't no way they're gonna talk about that on cable news. That's a beloved corporate Democrat. They would not criticize him under penalty of law. They might in passing mention everything like the nursing homes because it's become obligatory, right? But they're not gonna get into policy issues and how he's actually, screwing over some of the most vulnerable people in the state. Are they gonna talk about all the breaks he's given to real estate developers? Oh, hell no. I mean, the cocktail circuit would not like that. So look, the good news about Trump leaving is Trump leaving. And for the moment being, we saved democracy, it appears. The bad news is establishment is back and fully in control. And remember, we never finished fighting them. And so that fight is we're back to that fight now. And that fight is honestly in a lot of ways harder because that's where you have the weight of the entire corporate media on their side, tilting the scales and not really leveling with you on what their real underlying problems are. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.